Hey everyone, it's Matt here with Nightrun Studio, and in this final video of our save system tutorial series, we're adding multiple save slots. We'll show how to hook this all up in your main menu so that you can overwrite slots, create a new game, or load previous data. We'll also show how to set up your slots so that they show specific information about the save file, like the scene you last visited and the date when you last played that game. That's where we're headed in this video. Let's get started. Alright, so first of all, the good news is that because we've set this system up well, creating multiple save slots to save and load is actually going to be really easy. First of all, let's take a look in our Bootstrap here. So I'm just going to drag it up, head to my save manager, and let's open up that script for a moment. So you can see inside of here that currently we are saving to a path. We're just using our computer's persistent path, and then we're just creating a save file called save.json. We're just going to change this name here, and that's literally all we have to do to create multiple files. That said, in order to do this, we're going to need a way to actually track which save slot we're currently working with. So let's pop back into Unity and just create a new script here called load session. This is going to be a super simple data script. It won't use start or update, and it won't be deriving from mono behavior either, as this is going to be a static class. And all we're going to do in here is just create two pieces of information. First of all, we're going to have a public static integer, and this is going to be for our selected slot, and I'm going to start this one at -1. All of our slots will actually start at 0, and so -1 will sort of signify that this is going to be a non-valid save slot and that we shouldn't save our game. Now this next variable is purely optional. We're just going to create a static bool called isNewGame and initialize it as false. And we won't actually need this for our function in this tutorial. That said, if you have special events like cutscenes that you want to happen when you first start a new game, this will give you the flag you need to be able to track that. Alright, back in our save manager, we can now update our save path. Here I'll get rid of the save.json. We'll keep these quotation marks, and I'm just going to add a $sign at the beginning so that I don't have to concatenate by adding the pluses all the time. So here I'll just put slot space, and then I'll do a curly bracket, and put in load session dot selected slot, and then we'll put .json. So for example, this will be slot0.json and slot1.json, depending on which slot we select from our menu. With that done, we're ready to run a test. I'm just going to go into my data path here, make sure that I have no save data to begin with, and let's go ahead and hit play. When I get in the game, I'll just defeat this enemy here, collect some stuff just so that there's some data, and then we can stop the game. Here, if I look at my console, you can see that it did in fact print to slot -1, and I can see that that slot is also appearing here in my menu. Now when I play the game, it will load that data we just saved. Alright, that's working pretty good so far. We actually now officially have the power to save multiple slots by just changing this number here. That said, I want to make sure that we have an option where we don't save any data, and I want -1 to make it so that no data is saved. So let's head to our save manager. And here in onApplicationQuit, we're just going to create a full method here. We're just going to make it so that if our load session selected slot is less than 0, we return, meaning we don't actually want to save data in that case. With that done, I'll just delete the file that we created earlier, hit play, and now when we go ahead and play the game, since my selected slot is -1, when I hit stop, you'll notice there's no debug print, and we aren't actually saving anything. Alright, that's working pretty well. We can now save multiple slots. By using -1, we can make it so that there's no saving happening. Let's actually set this up in our menu now. So here in my menu, I'm just going to go up to my canvas, and I'm going to retitle this one as main menu. I'll then double click on it just so we can get it centered in our camera here. Now this button is no longer going to be for starting game. It will now be our new game button, and I'm just going to update its text to match that. Next, let's just duplicate this button. We can call this new one save slot here. And I'm going to take the new game and put it down below. With that done, we can head on over to our save slot, which has some text here. Let's just set this up so that it says empty by default. And then we're going to change the size of the slot. I'm going to go with about 320 by 130, but you can pick whatever works for you. Now ultimately, I want this to have some metadata here so that when you look at the slot, you can see, say, what scene we're loading or what time you last saved. So here, let's first of all rename this first text as room text. We can then duplicate it, and I'm going to make this next one date text. And I'm just going to make this one a smaller size and kind of move it down a little bit, and move up the original one. Now let's slide that first slot over, and then we can just hit Command D to duplicate, drag the next one over, and just repeat the process until you have as many save slots as you'd like to have. I'm then just going to shift click all of them and sort of center it underneath my title so that it looks nice. Alright, then now that our menu's all set up, let's head back into our session persistence and create a new script here called main menu to actually run this thing. Alright, so the very first thing that I want to do is actually make it so that our different save slots are set to be interactable or uninteractable, depending on whether or not there's actually data in them. So let's begin by getting rid of update. We will need start, though I'll get rid of the green writing here. And let's actually just make a serialized private reference to each of our buttons. This will be an array since there's more than one, and we'll call it save slots. For that to work, we will have to add the namespace that we're using unityengine.ui. Now then, down in our start method, we're going to use a for loop here. And essentially we're just going to get an integer called I that'll start at 0, and it's just going to loop through all of our save slots length. So since I have 4, it'll do this 4 times. And now for each save slot, it's just going to take this save slot it's looking at, so starting with the first one, and it will set its interactability to be equal to, and here we're just going to create a new method called slotExists that will literally check if that slot exists, and we'll pass along I, meaning the slot we're currently looking at. So let's go ahead and create that helper method. This will be a private bool method called slotExists, and it's just going to take in an integer so that it knows which slot it's checking. So how do we actually check if a file exists? Well, first of all, we're going to have to create a string, which is going to be the path that we're going to check for the file. And we're actually going to be doing this a bunch of times in this script, so bear with me, but we're going to make a helper method for our helper method. This new method will be a private string called getSavePath, and it'll just be designed to literally construct save paths based on which slot we're wanting the path for. So here it will use the path.combine. It'll look at our application's persistent data path, and then we can tell it the exact slot that we're looking for. In our case, we're going to use that same notation we did earlier, a $slot with a space, and then in curly brackets we'll put the slot, so the number of the slot we're looking at, .json. Now then, back up in our slotExists, our path is just going to be equal to getSavePath, and we'll just pass the slot along. Now then, we're just going to return a value, either true or false, based on whether or not the file exists at that path. If it does, it'll return true, and if not, false. Now then, back in our start method, as it's looping through each of our slots, if it gets a true value that the slot exists, it'll make it interactable, and if it's false, it'll turn it off. Now back in Unity, let's go to our main menu, and we'll make sure to add the component main menu. And here we've got a save slots dropdown that currently is empty. So let's lock our inspector. We can shift click each of our save slots and drag them on in there. We'll then want to make sure that we unlock the inspector again, and let's hit play. Now when we get in the game, you'll notice that all of the slots get turned off, and that's because we don't have any save data. Now I realize that's not super exciting, we're just turning off buttons. Let's make this a little bit more useful by creating a way to actually load files once they exist. So back in our main menu, let's create a public method here called onSaveSlotClicked, and it will take an integer for the slot that we want to load. Now in here, what we first of all just want to do is get that load session and tell it that isNewGame is equal to false here. We're loading a game, not creating a new one. All right, now the part that we will all need is this next part where we're going to create a string. We'll call it JSON. And essentially it's just going to look at a file, read all of that text. Now, which text is it looking at? Well, here we'll use that getSavePath again, and we'll just pass along our slot. So it's going to find the text for whatever slot we're trying to load and turn it into a great big string. Obviously, a string isn't a lot of good to us, so what we want to do is create a save data file. We'll call this data, and here we're just going to use the JSON utility to convert from JSON, and then what is it that we're wanting to convert it into? Well, into a save data file. And what file do we want to convert? Well, it's that JSON string we just created. Once that's done, we can talk to our scene manager and just tell it that we want to load the scene, and here we'll just use our data's last scene name to load it. Don't forget that you need to make sure you have unityengine.scenemanagement up top, or else you'll get an error for that. All right, now back in Unity, let's go ahead and shift click each of these save slots. And if we scroll down, you'll notice that it still has the old scene changer that was on our start game button. We can remove that as we will no longer need this script. That said, we do need each of these to talk to our menu. So let's drag the main menu in there. And for function, we're just going to go to main menu on save slot clicked. Now each of these is going to need its own integer. So we'll go 0, 1, 2, and 3. So now we have the ability to load, but we haven't actually created any save game. So I'm just going to pop into room 1 for just a second here, head into my load session, and for the moment I'm going to change that -1 to a 0. Makes it so that this is in fact a valid save slot. I'll then hit play, just destroy an enemy, collect some stuff, and head to the next scene before hitting stop. You'll see that I now have a slot 0 save slot. We can head back to main menu now, and we don't actually need to do anything here except hit play, and you'll notice that we now have slot 0 lighting up. There's no data on it yet, but when we click it, it does in fact load that save data we just had. And when we head to the other scene, you'll notice the enemy is still defeated, and that map is also missing. Alright, so that's working pretty well, but it would sure be nice if we could actually create some new save data without having to go and hack into the files. So let's head back into our main menu and create a public void on new game clicked method. So whenever we click new game, we want to make it so that we can click on any of the save files and either start a new game or overwrite existing data to create a new game. So what we'll do here is we'll just use a for each loop to go through each button. We'll call them slot in our save slots array. And all we want to do is make sure that they are now all interactable, meaning we can click on any one of them. Now from here, we'll actually be clicking on a save slot to pick which one will be our new game. And so we need a way to make it so that that method branches depending on whether it's a new game. So let's come up top and create a private bool called isNewGame, and make sure that when we go to the new game clicked, we set isNewGame to true. Back in Unity then, let's go ahead and go to new game. We'll make sure that we remove the scene changer from this one as well, and make sure that it can also talk to the main menu. Whenever we click it, we want it to tell main menu that on new game has in fact been clicked. The quick test shows that only the valid slot is on, but when we hit new game, they now all become interactable so that they're ready to be overwritten or have a new game set on them. Now then, let's go to main menu and make sure that we branch things so that on save slot clicked does different things depending on whether or not it's a new game or a loaded game. Now first of all, no matter what type of game it is, we need to make sure that our load session knows that the selected slot is whatever slot we just clicked. That said, if this is a new game, we want to do something a little different. First of all, if this is a new game, that means we're deleting the old slot data. So we'll create a new method called delete slot and pass in the slot we want to delete. We'll come back to that in just a second. Then we can tell our load session that this is in fact a new game. Again, this line is optional, and then we'll just get our scene manager to load scene, and here it needs to know which level to load, and in this case it will always be our first level. So let's create a variable for that. This will be a serialized private string called first level, and my first level is called room 1, so I'm going to go ahead and type that right in here. Now then, let's go ahead and create that delete slot method. This will be private, and it's going to take in an integer for the slot that we want to delete. So first of all, it's going to need to know the string for the path to the file that it actually is going to delete. Here, yet again, we're going to use our getSavePath method and pass along the slot. Here then we'll just do a little defensive check. So if a file exists at the path we just created, we simply want to delete that file. Alright, so if we're creating a new game, we'll delete the old slot, make sure our load session knows this is a new game, and then we'll just load the first level. That said, we need an else statement here to show what's going to happen if this is not a new game. Here we can just copy and paste all of our previous logic. Alright, no setup necessary, we can go ahead and hit play. You'll see that we've got our one file available. When I hit new game though, I can pick any slot I want. The new game is in fact starting. I can defeat an enemy, do some other random stuff. Then I can hit stop and hit play once more. And there it is. We've actually got another save file now. All right, so saving and loading data for different files is actually fully operational at this point. Next, I just want to add a little bit of metadata onto these slots. They don't just say empty all the time. In this case, we're going to add data for the name of the scene we're loading as well as the time of the save. So first of all, let's head into our save data file. And down at the very bottom here, along with our other scene data like the name of the scene, let's create a new public string called last save time. Now in order to set that value, we'll head to our save manager, and in our save game method, right after we run our for each loop to save all of our different persistence objects, we'll tell save data that its last save time should be equal to. Here we'll use a Unity function called datetime.now. We'll convert this to binary and to string. If you don't already have it, make sure that you add that you're using system.io in order for this to work. Now that we've got all our metadata, we're going to want a way to actually print that data onto our save slots. So back in Unity, let's create a new mono-behavior script, and we'll call this one save slot. We can go ahead and remove our start and update methods, and then we're going to need to create some references here. First of all, let's make a serialized private integer, which will just let this slot know what its index is. That is, which save slot it's connected to. It's also going to need a serialized private TextMesh Pro text reference, and we'll make this one for room text. In order for that to work, we need to use the TM Pro namespace. I'll then just copy that line, paste it down here, and make this other one for our date text. Now, as soon as the game starts up, we're going to call update display, which is a method we'll create down below here. This will be a private void method, and here we're going to need to create a string for the pathway to our data, as we're going to need to read that data in order to get the scene name and date that we're going to want to print. So here we'll use the path.combine function once again. We'll ask our app for its persistent data path, and once again use an interpolated string to give it the name of the file we're looking for. In this case, slot space, whatever index this happens to be, .json. Now that we've got a string for the actual path, we're going to check if that file exists. And here, if the file does not exist at the path we've just created, then we'll have our room text's text simply read empty, and we'll have our date text's text just be a literal empty string. At this point, we would then just return, as the file doesn't exist and we don't need to do anything else. That said, if the file does exist, then we'll want to grab all of the data from the file. So here we'll make a string that we'll name JSON, and it's just going to read all the text in that file. Now, turning all that data into a string doesn't do us any good by itself, so we need to convert it into a saved data file, which we'll call data. In order to do that, we're just going to use the JSON utility and convert from JSON into save data the JSON string that we just created in the line above. Now that we've got that data in a format we can read, we'll just tell our room text that its text will be equal to our save data's last scene name. Now our date text is just a little more complicated, as we don't want to print that giant integer that we created earlier. We're going to have to convert this into a readable format. So here we're going to use datetime once again. Remember, we need system namespace in order for that to work. And so for our save date, we're going to use datetime from binary. And here we're just going to parse out our data's last save time. Now that we've converted it back, we can tell our date text that its text should be equal to the save date. And here we'll just send it to string. And now we have the opportunity in these brackets to actually tell it the format we want. Here I'm going to use a sort of standard date format. At long last, now we can get back into Unity. Let's shift click all of our save slots, and then we can go ahead and add the save slot script. Now, unfortunately, we're going to have to do each of these individually, but for each of them, we're just going to want to make sure that we drag over our room text as well as our date text, and then make sure it has the right slot index, which will start at 0. And then we can just repeat that for each of these, making sure we increment the slot index by 1 each time. Now, when we first hit play, there won't be anything too fancy. We do see the scene name, but right now we're getting empty for our date, and that's just because we weren't saving the date when we created these save files. So let's go ahead and create one now. I'll overwrite the file, come in here and just do some stuff so there's actually some data to save. We can then stop the game, hit play, and now when we get in, you can see that we're getting all of our metadata. We're in room 2, and it has the date at which I just last played that game. All right, that's working really nicely. That wraps up our save system and actually our entire Metroidvania series. If you've been around for the whole journey, thanks for joining me. I hope you found it useful. Be sure to check out the new series, our top-down shooter/roguelike. Hope to see you there. Until then, though, this is Matt with Nightrun Studio. Cheers.